Hey everybody, JJ here. I just thought of doing this video because I did another one of my Babble videos, and it occurred to me that there's a drummer that was a massive influence on me, and it's been a while since this band was on my radar, and I kind of forget sometimes about how influential this guy was. And I'm glad I did the other video because I said his name and it reminded me of that. And I figured I should do this video before I forget about him again for another 20 years. So the drummer, in the grand scheme of things, as an early drummer, this guy meant as much to me as like Lars or Vinnie Paul, these guys that were my heavy metal heroes at the same time that I was listening to like all this heavy metal and hard rock. It was the early 90s, and grunge and alternative music were kind of kicking up, and this band and this drummer were kind of the catalyst of the pop punk movement, which bands like Blink-182 and a few others kind of capitalized on towards the later part of the 90s. But in the early 90s, there was one band that was above the rest, and the band was Green Day, and the drummer was Trey Cool. And so I would love to talk about Trey Cool at length for a second while he's fresh on my mind, because I would have been around 13 years old, maybe 12. I don't quite remember what year the album came out, but if you're a Green Day fan at all, you might know the album Dookie from Green Day. For a lot of people, I think that was kind of obviously the introduction to that band. I want to say it was 94. Album gets released, and it's just that whole year is like single after single. When I Come Around, Basket Case, Long View. Like, you couldn't escape that band. And before I get into Trey Cool, the impact of Green Day for me is quite large. To me, there's never been like a band that they're like a modern day Ramones, or like a modern day kind of Motorhead maybe. I'll keep that comparison, and the reason is because they have a signature sound, and regardless of the kind of song they're putting out, whether it's like a fast kind of barn burner punk song, or maybe it's more like a Wake Me Up When September Ends or something like that, like these more mellow tunes that they got known for later in their career. What a wonderful like band, and just able to like hit after hit after hit, and these hugely memorable like songs. Even the songs that are the filler songs on their album are better than some bands' singles. Just an unbelievable amount of admiration for that band. I know there's a lot of divide with them sometimes because politically they get like the singer Billy Joe, he's politically minded, and people kind of go back and forth with the band falling in and out of favor. But I don't mix politics with music. I separate the art from the artist always, and I don't care what his thoughts are. And all I know is that guy knows how to write a song, and he has a wonderful my admiration for Billy Joe probably mirrors my admiration for Trey Cool. I'm not just into drummers. I love all musicians and different players, and I might get into some of those guys in some of these videos. But yeah, back to Green Day, and a lot of admiration for Billy Joe, the way he plays guitar, very unique vocal delivery and sound, and there's no mistaking that band when you hear them, which is hard to come by. And 1994, we hear all these songs. My friends and I, we're of the right age and of the right mindset for the silliness and the poop jokes and all that stuff. We're early teenagers, and those songs are speaking like to our hearts and stuff. And so, you know, the band comes out. Particularly in my case, I think the thing that really I latched on to, there was two things. It was the song "When I Come Around" was it endeared itself to me when I heard it, and it's just like a great song about, like, you know, longing and growing up and, you know, changing and stuff like that, which was kind of akin to what we were experiencing as early teenagers. And the second one would have been when I saw, we all saw it, but when I saw the video for Basket Case. And it was so, if you don't know the video, if you've never seen it, Green Day Basket Case, I mean, maybe it doesn't have the same impact now. It's been 30 years, but you know, it's just, what a cool video and a cool concept. And, you know, it's a showcase of the band, and you can see the playing and, you know, the exuberance they all have, and, you know, how good the band is kind of comes through in the video as well. So seeing that video was like a instant kind of love affair with Trey Cool. And, you know, he was a maniac, and, but his drumming was so high energy. And coming from a background where I did like, high energy music, and, you know, I was quite young, but I knew of the Ramones, and I knew of, some other early kind of punk, like more up-tempo bands, and maybe the Clash kind of gets thrown in there and stuff like that. But, you know, I hadn't quite gone down the rabbit hole with a lot of the underground or the more dangerous punk bands like the Sex Pistols, like whatever. They were punk, but they were out there too, so you knew them. And so listening to that band, like album Dookie comes along, everybody got it, like, you know, it sold 100 million copies or whatever it sold. Everyone had that, listened to it to death. And luckily, at this time, it was very hard to come across CDs. You know, if it wasn't in your local store, I mean, you'd end up having to mail it away for you know, CDs, and that could cost an arm and a leg back then. I used to imbibe in that a little bit, and it was a very expensive endeavor. But I had a friend, and this is kind of like the early, you know, our version of tape trading and all these things that happened in the 80s was somebody would have a CD, they take a chance on something. If it was good, then we'd make a tape of it, and you'd trade that way, share music. And so I had a friend that was a big Green Day fan, a bigger fan than me. And he was actually earlier to the party. So he had purchased the 1039 Smoothed Out Hours, whatever it is, and the Kerplunk. He had both of those EPs. It wasn't the combined EP at the time. I think they were both separate. And so I would be at his house and with some of my other friends, and we'd be all listening to these earlier versions of Green Day. And even with the, you know, the poorer quality recordings, you could still see that the songwriting was there. Like my favorite Green Day song to this day is, you know, high up in the ranking. There's a lot of them, but, you know, this song stands out. It's 2,000 Light Years Away. And it's just unbelievably hooky. It's like, you know, like Dick Dale surf music mixed with like these lyrics, pop punk. Anyway, amazing song if you've never listened to it, and such high energy drumming. And listening to these songs, and, you know, I was still kind of developing. I'd been listening to a lot of heavy metal, and, you know, I thought my chops were up, but what I realized is, like, you know, Trey Cool was doing these amazingly fast tempos, and he was just constant, like, you know, 16th notes on the hi-hats all the time, and lots of opening and closing accents, and like, so there's a lot of that in my playing. And sometimes I forget the origin of it until I'm reminded that Trey Cool was the guy that I heard that was doing that on every, like, just all over the place. You know, hi-hat accents and really fast, you know, 16th note rolls, like around the drum set. And he was so like just fast and accurate, and, you know, kind of wild in his playing too, which I really admired a lot. So, you know, Dookie comes out, that album gets passed, sells 1 billion copies, And then we get into like, the Green Day kind of gets into a bit of it's not a low spot, but they had hit this huge mountain, and they start coming down the other end of it. They're still, you know, doing great and obviously selling out, but they're on somewhat of a decline at this time. And so you're getting towards like, the middle of the 90s and the beginning of the 2000s. And but the songs, like, you've got your Geek Stink Breath and 86 and like all these fantastic songs, and you get into the Warning album. And the Warning album to me is where you really see like this band is capable. Like they're not one trick ponies. And then at the same time, I'm, seeing these articles and things about Trey Cool and realizing that, he's got this insane musical background, and like, I think it was, I can't remember if it was marching or big band. And like, he's a seriously trained musician, playing the fool. and something I can, I'm drawn to as well. It's like, guys that they take it really seriously, and they have these weapons, but you keep them in. It's the old samurai thing, all these methods and all these things, but you keep them in your pocket. You don't show them off all the time, and you kind of release a little bit here and there and here and there. And so when it starts getting into the Warning album, and you start hearing him doing like, taking a ride. I think it's taking a ride, hitching a ride. Came back to me. And he's doing like a marching thing, and it's just like wow, it's this is a radio single, and we're hearing this kind of like these drumistic ideas, and so it opened my eyes to a whole new side of him. And that album starts to get really, like the Warning album starts to get really in the weeds musically, and incorporating a lot of things, and just like like far away from what Dookie and the earlier albums are. They really, in my opinion, matured as songwriters and exploration, and still staying within that 3 to 4 minute pop song format, but introducing these musical ideas that were off the charts, and much different than a band like Blink-182 had Travis Barker at the end of the 90s, all the Small Things, and Travis is in the band at that point. And he's obviously incredible, and he brings a whole new element to the band. But I couldn't really, they obviously are great songwriters, but these guys weren't, until later in their career as well. At that time, they weren't doing anything too risky musically. And Green Day was the band, the first pop punk band that I knew of, huge heights, took risks musically, didn't try to repeat themselves, and kind of fettered out a little bit. And, I obviously followed the band, and I kept on top of them for a long time. And I started to see around like 2001 that they had an album that they had recorded, and something, they weren't happy with it or something, or it got lost or something like that. And being really interested in that, and then the album that comes out of that is the American Idiot album, which is like a whole, 10 years into their career, 15 years into their career. And it's like a whole new rebirth of the band. It's like a rise again to the, it was a huge album. There's a musical based on that album. Like it doesn't really happen. Like Meatloaf might have one based on Bat Out of Hell or something, but or Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, or it's like that. Like these albums are just massive, and to have two of those albums in your career is like and to have them be separated like that as well is kind of unique for that band. And once again, it's like Trey Cool comes in, and he's just like a preeminent like drummer. His like there's no filler on anything that he does. It's all refined, and for a band that gets like labeled as, I don't know, tasteless or lowbrow or something like that, the musicianship to me belies that fact, in the point that it's like like these guys can play and they can write and they're not afraid to try things. And that's something that I really admire with bands, is that, at the end of the day, to me, art is for the artist making it. And it's a selfish endeavor. If people like it, that's great. That's the idea. But you can't go around in your life creating art, and hoping that you're going to please Joe and please Bonnie. And it doesn't work like that. Art is not made for the masses. And sometimes it becomes massive. But, it's never the point. And, but yeah, I have such admiration for that guy. And, the band has been continuing on for a very long time. He was influential to me in a way too, where I was speaking about cymbals when the Trey Cool's name came up. And I remember that was kind of where I had always looked at the rock and roll cymbals, like your zillion A's and your Z's and your more hard rock cymbals. And when I looked at Trey Cool, because he had a, like a jazz background or, a different musical upbringing, and he was using a lot of K's. And I was like, what are these? Like, it just opened up this whole new avenue of cymbal sounds and what you could use for this. And maybe the rules could get thrown out the window and you don't have to worry so much about that kind of stuff. And as an aside, I just was thinking, I've been talking a lot with another friend of mine about like Woodstock and these musical moments, and like Woodstock '94 is probably another one. I didn't see the pay-per-view of it, but I did see clips of that performance of them at Woodstock '94, and it's no surprise that performance single-handedly kind of probably elevated the band to the status they have now. They were so likable. They were so cool. Like, I have a lot of respect for, I see bands nowadays and it's like the show doesn't go on because the laptop's not working. And that's not cool. Sorry, if you're in that kind of band, that's not cool. But like Green Day is having mud slung at them, they're dodging this and that and the other thing. And I have a lot of like admiration for bands that can just plow through these things, and they're so confident and they're so like, they have such a FU attitude, you can't stop them. They're like juggernauts, nothing's gonna stop us. And it's no surprise to me that a band that had that kind of like that moxie and that attitude has, whatever controversies or whatever, like downsides they have, it's like they're steadfast, and they'll come back, or, they'll come back around, and, they don't, bunch of tough guys, I guess, like they just march on, and I really admire that too. And one of the few bands, I know they've had, different members earlier on, but, for a band to have now almost a 40-year career and still have the three original, not the founding members, but the most well-known members. There's never been a period where somebody left and came back, and like it's been the three guys. And I think that's a testament to the band and probably like the bond that they share. I'm gonna guess there's a huge mutual respect that is shared amongst all three guys, and you don't have Green Day without all of the three guys. Like they're just one of those bands. Like, it's nobody's replaceable, and it's amazing that if these guys find each other and find this chemistry and make things work and stuff like that. And if you haven't seen much of Trey Cool, I give you this because it gives you an idea of personality, because he's a wild man. Seems like it anyway. There's a famous clip. I used to watch all the late night shows because it was a great way to find new music. And so I'd watch, David Letterman was my favorite at the time, but I watched all of them to see who was on as a musical guest. And every time Green Day was on anywhere, I would make sure to watch, because the Trey Cool was such a wild personality, and he was so unpredictable. He's like a modern day Keith Moon, and but it's oh, it's not harmless fun because he lights drum sets on fire, and I'm sure somebody's been burned, but it's like he's crazy and but a lovable crazy. And so there's a great bunch of clips that have been assembled on YouTube, and it's all of Green Day's appearances on Late Night with David Letterman. And it shows you. At one point, I think David Letterman has a huge respect for drummers, and he always has. And I think he was actually afraid of Tré Cool and his unpredictability. But man, there's so many cool stories about Tré Cool like that I've heard through the years. I heard, and I don't know if it's true, but I heard that he single-handedly bankrupted Slingerland drums because of the amount of drum sets that he was burning during the like the mid 2000s or something like that. Like he had switched from DW to this company and this company, and he was shuffling around. And Slingerland actually, like, it could be true, it could be not. It's one of those things. It's like I've never seen it confirmed, but you know, Slingerland did disappear, and there's a possibility that he was going through that many drum sets and destroying them and killing their bottom line. So, but yeah, it's just a wonderful musician, and such an inspiration to me. And it's a shame that I forget sometimes because, you know, it's the roots of my playing. And a lot of times I forget where I've picked up certain traits or certain thought processes and things like that, because I spend so much time sitting and analyzing music, and just listening and you know, just thinking about music. And you know, sometimes old ideas get overshadowed by new ones, and sometimes I've even, you know, I think a certain characteristic is from a more modern player, but that player also picked it up from the same guy that I picked it up 20 years ago, which is pretty cool. And you know, I've run into a few you know, more modern players and had some conversations with them through the years, and I find that we have a lot of similar things. And it's interesting to see guys from completely different genres who picked out these little nuances, you know, from a pop punk player. And you know, at that time, mixing genres, it's like it was kind of frowned upon. You're either heavy metal or you're a punk guy, and a couple bands bridged that gap, but like Motorhead or something. But they were very separate worlds, and to see some modern guys that share some of those influences the same as me is pretty cool. So shout out to you, Tré Cool. This has been the one about Tré Cool. I hope you check him out. You can find the Green Day albums. They're not hard to find. Cheers.